I want to touch on the definition of just pointing out the intentional component of it. By nature, fraud is covered up. It's hidden. It usually does go undetected for a period of time because of the intent behind it in trying to hide and cover up. And it's a person that is trusted and knows the processes and systems and the vulnerabilities within the organization. So that's why it can go for a while without being detected. It's certainly a violation of trust. And in every case that we're typically reached out to by various ministries that suspect it or have had allegations, oftentimes it's ministries that don't even have an audit or a review and are very much lacking in some of the best practices that we'll be talking about. They'll call in, and it's a person that they had trusted, that has been entrusted in key positions within the organization with access to ministry assets, and then because of that, fraud is committed. So I want to start with a reminder of the fraud triangle, because the way that I'll go over these case studies to come is actually looking at these points of the triangle for each of these case studies. So I'm going to start with the lower right point on incentive. And going back to my comments of kind of profile of a fraudster, again, it looks like you or me. It looks like any other man or woman, or doesn't matter ethnicity, doesn't really matter age. But there are some incentives or pressures that the individual experiences that creates this thought and temptation that fraud might be committed. The pressures might be just personal financial difficulties due to medical bills, college costs, bankruptcy perhaps, a divorce proceeding. I mean, you can imagine all the scenarios personally that might create an incentive and a pressure. And some people listening today, you might have these same kinds of pressures. I have a college student here coming up in August with my oldest daughter. They'll be heading off to college. So those are real pressures of life. And if not handled with integrity and with proper controls, can lead to a path of temptation for individuals. So there's that point, the incentive component. That's very much what I would consider kind of environmental for the person. Then you move to the lower left point there of rationalization. I actually consider this the psychological or even theological point of the fraud triangle. Nobody wants to feel like they're a fraudster. And so, if you ask a young college grad what you want to do with your life, nobody would say, well, I want to grow up and be a fraudster. It's the lack of good decisions, compromises in character and integrity because of life pressures that will lead to this rationalization of, I'm not going to steal the money, I'm just going to borrow it. I haven't had a raise for 3 years, so I'm just going to take a little money that really is kind of owed to me because I'm working extra hours. The ministry doesn't pay overtime. So you can see how the human mind begins to rationalize why the things that are occurring is anything but fraud, when in fact it is fraud that is happening. And then the top point of the triangle will really be the key focus of what Ken will hit on. And I consider this the organizational component. It's the opportunity. This is internal controls. So an individual might have the incentives and the pressures to commit fraud. They might rationalize why they could commit fraud and justify it in their own mind. But as an organization, you can actually limit the opportunity to varying degrees. You can never eliminate it entirely, but you can certainly make it more difficult to commit fraud, and certainly more difficult to commit fraud for a length of time where it would go undetected for a long period, with best practice internal controls that we'll talk about.
Subscribe to our YouTube channel for more finance, governance, and fundraising news and insights for your church or ministry.